Oh, here we are. We're ready for the Mike and Doug show, but we can't find the head miner. I think he's stuck in the mines, Douglas.
Sometimes the elevator gets stuck, and sometimes I'm worried that there might have been a cave-in, because he goes so deep, he comes out on the other side of the earth in China, and
So I give him a call. I say, "Hey, Mike, we're ready to get started. Where are you?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm pulling together some last facts. The miners are sending it up, and I want to make sure the report is full." And what we're talking about, people, is Kari Lake. Oh, my goodness. We could smell a stinky fish a mile away with her. That's why I don't post a lot of stuff on her, because I know there's something about her. Well, it turns out that she's just like an all-American girl, but really very naive. In fact, she probably doesn't even know about the Pilgrim Society. And I'm thinking she doesn't really know what her husband is up to. And his name is Halpern, Jeff Halpern. And what is the miners found about him would make me sick as a woman to think that I had a husband like that, following me around with the video camera. That's like stalking your wife. Plus, has Jeff told his wife about his background? She has a lot of questions to answer.
being groomed for propaganda is just also being groomed for politics, because it's one and the same. These are the biggest liars on the face of the earth, politicians and newscasters. And she was a newscaster. She was a weather newscaster.
That's the first giveaway. She works for mainstream media, NBC. You can't trust any of those people.
No, you can't. And as a matter of fact, it would be literally tantamount to impossible that a newscaster, an anchor, didn't know that she wasn't doing any investigative journalism, and none of her investigative
look who came out of the mines. He's here. Now he's gone.
Yeah, well, the gnomes are still chewing at his toes, so he doesn't have time yet. Okay, he's got to get the gold out of his pockets.
It's sort of like DeSantis. When I saw or Kamala Harris, I mean, you can sniff them long before they get into the public eye. And so I called up the mines and said, "You need to do a deep dive on Kari Lake." Deep dive on Kari Lake. And they said, "Why? She seems to be okay." I said, no, there's something in her background. And sure enough, there is. It's sort of like with Kamala Harris. Remember that time we said, "Oh, Kamala Harris, she's going to run for president. You watch, or vice president or something." And so before anybody even knew who Kamala Harris was, we went in there, we got our birth certificate, brought it up, shared it with everybody. And everybody knows Kamala Harris is not eligible to hold the office of vice president or president. She's an illegal alien as far as we can tell. There has been no proof of her citizenship. And even if she does prove her citizenship, you're going to see she's not a natural born. And so here we are. Kari Lake smells like a fish to me. So I asked the miners. And Mike, here you are. So I'll get off.
Hello.
Hi, Mike. So we're already beating up on Kari Lake. I just want to say that I hope that they will bring out new candidates. First off, this election is way too premature. DeSantis has already gotten in and gotten out. You've already eliminated a half a dozen people that could have been also running for the office or being a vice presidential candidate. And then when people kept saying to me, "You have to listen to Kari Lake, she's saying great things," you know what I said to them? So did Jeff Sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a setup for Trump. This is another baiting for Trump. Doesn't he understand when people are on his side, but they're really obviously on the other side, that they're liars? I couldn't once ever listen to Kari Lake speak a single word, because after, 15 seconds of hearing her, I said she's a complete idiot. She's a stooge, and she is a liar. You could tell that she's a liar by looking at her face. So she knows, as a newscaster.
Really?
Let me just ask.
No, Mike is not going to say she's a liar. Mike is going to pull up the facts and show us who she really is.
Okay, well, I just want to ask this question.
Wait, one more thing. And you knew that this was true because we posted the research yesterday, and here comes Bannon the Bloviator saying that Robert F. Kennedy would be a great vice president, and if he doesn't work out, Kari Lake. So you see, we can smell it a mile away. Mike, what did you find?
You can.
Oh, I smelled her so far away. Why? Here's question.
Okay, well, let me tell you before you say any more.
Oh.
I didn't see that. I listened to what she said, and what she said ticks off the list of all the things that we see as priorities. But now we're learning the strategy. We're learning this government by journalism that W.T. Stead conceived of in the late 1800s. These people are the best at it, and they know how to pull everybody's chains.
Michael,
Yes.
is it possible that a major newscaster, someone who was an anchor in a news station, who saw that they don't have a single journalist out on the beat, out on the street, there's no investigative journalism whatsoever done in news now, if they even act like it's investigative journalism, they fake it. And she knows that she didn't write her script. Her script is the same script as every other newscaster, every other anchor in America. And then, of course, she would have to know. So the question to you is it possible that Kari Lake is so ignorant that she didn't know that her script, her propaganda was being written for her by Avid, by ISIS management, by the Brits? Is it even possible that someone could be in that position and not know that?
Well, they would really have to be brain dead, because they see those chyrons on their screens that they read every night. And surely at some point, somebody's going to say, well, who wrote this? Where did I get it? Where did it come from? If you don't ask that, you are pretty much dumb as a rock.
Yeah. So that's why I could never listen to her. And so when they said, oh, she's going to fight it, she's running for governor in Arizona, and she lost, and she's going to fight it, and she's going to sue. Sue who? Who did she sue? First off, people don't understand that this is the state legislature who's in control of the elections. And unless you get them to change the law, they're not breaking the law. They're not doing anything illegal. They passed new laws to create all of that fraud ability in the last presidential election. She knew that. She knew when she ran for governor exactly what was going on. But it is, as Tyler mentioned before you came up out of the mines, and I hope you get that elevator fixed, because I would hate for you to get stuck down there sometime. That'd just be terrible. And so really the question is, why does Trump and why does everyone think that she should be Trump's vice presidential running mate, when if Trump had a single ounce of intelligence, first off, he would have never approved warp speed, which caused us to then have illegal vaccinations in America, and he would never have approved the World Health Organization's recommendations. He would have simply ended our relationship with the World Health Organization and the UN. Why would he not know that Kari Lake is nothing more than a setup?
I can tell you why. It has nothing to do with Kari Lake. Trump was raised in the same America that we were raised in. Now, when you go to New York, for example, and you walk into any office building pretty much across the board, you're going to see media outlets pitching NBC, CBS, ABC on every screen in every room. And I know that Trump's offices had that. So when that's all you're listening to, you're going to be programmed to think a certain way about certain issues and certain people. And I was programmed. You were programmed. Now, you're a little different, because you could, with your special gifts, you could see right through that stuff. Some of the rest of us couldn't see that, Douglas. So what we did is we gave the person presenting the data the benefit of the doubt. And since there was no other data to counter it, we assumed it was true. And Trump is a product of the American culture. And so I think it is possible, because I think most of us have been there. We just accepted what ABC, CBS, NBC said. Walter Cronkite, Dave Huntley and Brinkley, who was the guy in World War II, was stationed in England, gave the report during the bombing of London.
Well, don't forget Walter Cronkite. We all thought he was our daddy, our grandfather. We believed everything he said. And he turns out to be a Pilgrim Society member.
Exactly.
So if anybody is coming from mainstream media for a political career, cats all around the world should say, hey, stop and research them.
Absolutely. Well, I hope we're going to talk about that, because what we've noticed is now something more than just a one-off. We've seen a pattern here in how these government by journalism propagandists groom somebody to be put forward. And this is another good example. Uh, so we'll talk about that. I'll save that for later.
Oh, you're going to save the gold nuggets for later. Well, okay, then what are you going to start off with first? Let's see. Could be that her second husband has been her controller, and that as soon as she found out really what was going on, they promoted her to a position in New York where she then became an anchor. Okay, you can't become an anchor without knowing that the mainstream media is nothing but lies. So you're a liar. And if you're repeating those lies, you invite the scepter, the specters, the phantoms, and the demons into yourself. And then she did what? Well, what do they all like to do? Once they're the demonic spokesperson in a mainstream media anchor position, the only higher position working for the devil is to run as a politician. So she runs as a politician. And how many times have we seen this? Facial recognition on television means you're probably going to get elected. It doesn't matter how stupid you are, just that you're well known. It's nothing, and it's not even a popularity contest because you usually don't have good choices. You're choosing the lesser of two evils.
Well, when we started the investigation, we do what we normally do, and we started looking at what's out there in the web, and we saw a telltale problem in that we saw page after page after page of Google search on these obscure websites that nobody's heard of, where they're showing her biography with that of her husband, second husband, Jeff Halpern. And at first, you do what you typically do. You read through a couple of them and you think, okay, there's nothing here, and you move on. But what we discovered is that some of these websites were being published from Ghana in Africa and from Vietnam in Asia. And so these are obvious shill sites that are used by propaganda shills to fool most of the people who don't have time to do deep research into the people that they're listening to on TV. So if you just take the first couple of pages of Google and read through that website from Ghana and that other one from Vietnam and these other obscure sites like Heavy and Hollywood Gossip and things like this, you think you've done your research. And since you don't see anybody discussing any problems, you move on. And that's what you assume in your head. And that's actually, frankly, what I had done earlier with her. And I didn't see anything and I didn't want to spend any time on it. But having now spent the time on it, we see all the telltale signs of grooming. We see that a narrative is being groomed and unhelpful issues in the person's past are being buried. And that's what these sites are intended to do. Keep away, nobody's perfect. And so therefore there's going to be things in a person's background that you don't necessarily want the public to know. But in her case, it wasn't so much her that was being buried, but the resume of her husband, her videographer, NBC videographer husband, Jeffrey Elliott Halpern, who was being buried. His background was being buried. And it was a deep hole. And it probably took us a week. It took us a week to get past just the barrage of obfuscation or discombobulated evidence. And we even found one biography at a biography.com website that actually had taken the resumes from 3 different Jeffrey Halperns and mixed them all together. And they put Kari's name in there. They put the name of their children, and then they put up a pixelated picture that you really couldn't see who it was because it was so pixelated. But we had some of our geniuses unpixelated, and we discovered nothing other than Jeffrey Halpern and Kari Lake at a ball game with their 2 kids. And so they are working hard to make sure we don't know who Jeffrey Halpern is.
And didn't you discover much more dirt as you looked into his history?
Right. Yeah. So what we did is we tried to find somewhere where he was discussing his family background, and we could find nothing but a few little tidbits. And these were actually statements that came from Kari herself, where she said that her husband was Jewish, one thing, And secondly, that he was Colombian American. So for most of us, when we see anything coming from Colombia, we think of drugs. But we didn't want to judge. We just looked at that. Okay, he's got Colombian American heritage, and he claims to be Jewish. But then on some of the other websites, these shill sites, he claims to have been a convert from Judaism to Christianity, but not really. The Time magazine went into great detail on a supposed quote from Kari, where she says, "Well, we kind of became Christians, but we didn't really like the pedophilia in the Catholic Church, so we actually went to an evangelical church, and so we kind of raised our kids Catholic or evangelical, and God and Jesus and all that." I mean, it was very, very flippant, and that's always a propaganda telltale sign that somebody's trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes.
Well, the second that you mentioned her husband's name, of course, I started yelling, "The walrus, the walrus, the walrus." And little did I know that the miners would eventually bring up so much on the fact that he is probably from a spy family, that the connection to Stephen Halpern, the man who led the attempted coup on Trump while he was in office from Britain. And we have all that evidence. Matter of fact, the evidence is out your ears oozing. It just so much.
Give his name.
Who? Stephen Halper?
Yes.
Yeah.
Stephen Halper. It's not Halperin, it's Halper.
Yeah.
But what we discovered that's just a variant of the name Halperin. And the Halperin's not actually a very big family globally. And they've even done DNA studies on the family Halperin. And one of their centers of gravity is none other than Frankfurt, where the Rothschilds are from. Too bad. And then we see that Halperin in both Hebrew and English means money changer. Whoops.
Oh, that didn't cause any of your ears to burn, did it?
Oh, no.
No. Now, you're going to get into explaining some of the details of this, which again always seems to go back to the British and to the creation of the CIA, the OSS, the MI5, the MI6.
Right.
What is it? The HGCQ or the GCHQ, which always leads back to the same place, which basically you might as well say mainstream media. Because it's the exact same people who, from the Empire Press Conference, later the Empire Press Union, which now still exists and is still the controlling factor for the Associated Press and for Thomson Reuters, it all comes from the city of London. All of our news, anytime you get any news, if it's breaking news, where did it come from? One of the shill London newspapers.
At the Y last night, I was running and looking at Fox News, and they were actually using the Daily Mail as their news source for information related to the Trump indictment. The Daily Mail out of England. We don't have. You mean we don't have a single newspaper in the U.S. that we can cite other than the Daily Mail in the U.K.? Man, they must have reporters running all over, like little rats running all over our country.
I think that they can just step into one of those Star Trek things and just zoom over there, get beam them up to the place where the news is happening, because they always have the picture that makes it internationally is always from a London newspaper. And how did they get there to take the picture?
Exquisite detail about the human interest side of the story. They always pull in you with emotional stories. Daily Mail is really good at what they do. And we have to remember, Daily Mail was started by Lord, I keep remembering his real name versus his, Douglas, help me out.
Lord. Are you talking Northrop? Or are you talking about?
No, not Northrop.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Yeah, obscure. We don't talk about him much, but yeah, he's definitely one of the source beings.
He was one of the founders.
W.T. Stead. I mean, if you want to talk about the what would you call it, the Inquirer type magazines. W.T.
Right.
Stead was the king of that, and he was Cecil Rhodes's agent. And
Right.
later, he basically created the propaganda machinery that we see right now as mainstream media. It hasn't changed a bit. It's the same characters, the same British families still own it, the same British families still design it. So in America, we don't get any news. And so look at this. Okay, first off, Fox News is fake. If you didn't know that, I'm sorry to wake you up. If you think you're a conservative Republican and you're watching Fox
Oh,
News, sorry. It's the Mercers who created it.
I'm going to interrupt you right now because I'll forget it otherwise. Fox News, we're talking about Fox Broadcasting. And in the latest round of JFK assassination records from last month, we discover that there's records showing that Fox Broadcasting was a money laundering source for the OSS CIA going back into the 40s and 30s. So there you go.
Yeah.
Once a spy, always a spy.
Fox got sued by Dominion for lying about the fake election, and they had to do that so there could be a lawsuit on record showing that the people admitted that they were guilty for stating the truth. The truth is, it was the most obvious and the most reported fraudulent presidential election in history. And anyone who doesn't know that is an idiot. I'm sorry. 2 million fake votes in Pennsylvania alone that came in through mail. Well, yes, the legislature, as I said before, did pass a law that made that legal because of the pandemic. That's all fake. That's the reason. Part of the reason for the pandemic happening was so that they would get control of locking people down so that they could then have mail-in votes or votes done on your phone so that they could manipulate them exactly as they do with all electronic voting machines that are run by the software called Optech, which was owned and created by the United Nations and what's his name? Mark Malloch Brown. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with a person who ran for governor, okay, but what did she run for governor on? Just like DeSantis, the MAGA ticket. And DeSantis is a pathetic attempt to mimic, to shadow, to copycat Trump. Well, first off, Trump has got a lot of problems, very serious problems. He's got to answer for the 26 million Americans he killed. Okay, that's his biggest problem. He won't answer for one death of one person from his stupid warp speed injections. Until he answers that, he's certainly not going to get the votes of those people who had loved ones die because of the mainstream media propaganda that was promulgated through the World Health Organization, the NIC, the CDC, and also all mainstream media, including Fox. So if you think Fox is the hero of conservative Republicans, you're extremely naive.
These guys learned over 100 years ago how to play the Hegelian dialectic of pitching this side, coming up with a middle ground, and making sure that these people could cross each other in government and out of government and feed each other. That's really what they've learned how to do really well. And so consequently, they're going to give conservatives what they want a certain percentage of the time, but not too many percentages, because if it's too many percentages, they gain real power. So they want to keep it below that. And they're just really good at it. And we've never seen this we haven't seen the inner workings of this tactic. So therefore, most people assume it didn't exist, but now we can see it does exist. But one of the fascinating things about studying Kari Lake's barrage of these fake biographies is what they're having to do today. As we looked at the older players like Henry Kissinger and Paul Volcker, they've had enough years of propaganda. Their biographies have kind of matriculated into textbooks and legitimate sources. So when you go see something published in 3 or 4 magazines and the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, you start to assume that those facts are true. Many times, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But that keeps the confusion going so that nobody can really get a handle on who they are or what they've done or who they who they are really identified with. But they've got a problem, as we can see now, with their grooms. These people that have been groomed since World War II and their children, in that they don't have time to build up this fake persona that they used to be able to take decades to do. And so they're having to go more quickly. And so now they're having to push forward people like Ron DeSantis. They got to get them through school. They've got to get them in the right schools. And then they've got to start moving them forward in business and in government very quickly. And in the process, these people look dumb because they never have a thought of their own. You know, they're reading scripts or something they've memorized. And so they've got to shore up the credibility that these people don't have because they've never really worked. And so what they do is they use all these shill social sites to fool most of the public who think they're doing research on these individuals, but in fact they're reading their own source material, which is these fake biographies. But one of the key telltale signs there was something wrong in Kari Lake's otherwise squeaky clean resume was a huge Time magazine article that was carried on her that went into exquisite detail, had great photos, and kind of talked about her being conservative, but not too. She used to be liberal, she used to be conservative, so they were easy on her. But in the process, they made some mistakes, and one of the key mistakes was their discussion of their spiritual journey and their spiritual life, and they used phraseology that no Christian would use. And so when you read that in a propaganda piece, you know it's either written for them or handed to them to be to put forward. And so they tried to obscure whether Jeff Lake was Jewish or not. They tried to obscure whether these are really committed Christians or not, and made sure that they didn't discuss anything substantive, so no real Christian could really sort it out. But they made some flippant comments, which were just red meat to a dog to somebody who's wanting to know what's going on.
Well, you quoted it a minute ago. I taught my children Jesus and all that stuff.
God and Jesus.
God and Jesus and all that stuff.
And all that.
All that.
Yeah. God and Jesus and all that, you know.
Oh, yeah. You know, that's the most holy sacred stuff to me, you know, all that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So anyway, what we have here is, first off, when people started going crazy for Kari Lake after she lost the election, and even the Democrats were giving her airtime. Mm-hmm. Right there, stop. Why would they give her any airtime unless they were planning to shove her down Trump's throat? Make her a person who looks like a conservative Republican with the same MAGA ideas, who also got ripped off through a fraudulent vote in Arizona. Perfect. What a wonderful running mate. Now, let's just take this for a second. The second someone said this to me, and it's a very smart person I know who told me this and said, oh, no, keep your eye on this person. I said, no, you must be kidding, right? Why didn't she link onto the investigation and the audit of the election in Arizona when she wanted to bring her lawsuit? No, she went after one of the most stupid elements of fraud. Was not fraud. She would never win that case because it was legal at the time. If the legislature passes a law that says you can write your vote on a napkin and stick it in your garbage and it'll be collected and used for the election, then that is legal, okay? And that's basically what those boxes were that collected the votes that were being harvested, right? Those were harvested ballot collection boxes, which were not secure, which were stuffed. And we have, how many hours of films do we have of people stuffing the election boxes? How much evidence do we have that she ignored in her lawsuit? All of it. She only went after the things that were legal. Now, let's go to Trump. Trump has now been indicted for what, 6 counts, or, you know, that stupid judge is trying to add new counts. And he will add new counts because he'll say he's going to try to shut up Trump.
Well, these bad guys always do that. They always go way overboard and claim most of the claims they know they can't even support, but it's good for propaganda.
And what do you call it when you make someone be silent during the whole proceedings?
Gag order.
They'll put a gag order on Trump during the election so he can't speak. Okay, this is how stupid it's gotten. All right, now let's remember what's going on with this indictment. Who are they going after? Trump's attorneys. And who's the number one attorney they're going to go after? Rudy Giuliani. And why do we know this? Because Rudy Giuliani.
Wait, you got his title. You got to get his title right.
Oh,
Sir Rudy Giuliani,
America's mayor. Yes,
there you go.
Sir Rudy Giuliani, the American.
He bent the knee to the
favorite
Queen.
mayor. The mayor, he's a hero from 9/11. Remember, he was in the tower that they brought down with his command when he said, he was on the radio, we can hear him speaking, and he said, pull it. That means, and then the building went down. That's where his new office was during 9/11. And guess where the only film of the first plane hitting the first tower was? It was from a camera that Rudy and his FEMA people were out on the streets filming, and someone bumped the camera, and the camera happened to spin around to point at exactly that part of the building where the plane struck. And that's the only film we have of that. All others were confiscated and, of course, destroyed. Who was standing right there on the street when it happened? Rudy Giuliani. He knew Rudy Giuliani was part of taking down the World Trade Center. This is just a fact. And if you don't know that,
I would like to go into that. But if you started to ask me about Halpern's background, and perhaps it would be helpful if we brought that up now, then it could percolate as we move along here. Is that okay?
Oh, well, let me just say one more thing. Giuliani took all the evidence from Ukraine that involved Burisma, involved Devon Archer, that involved Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and also what's his name, the representative of Mitt Romney, Cofer Black. All those people had committed fantastic crimes, but Rudy Giuliani went over there and gathered up evidence and then brought it, gave it to the Department of Justice and said, this is the path you have to go to prosecute Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and Devon Archer and all these people. He knew as a lawyer that he had spoiled the case. He knew as a lawyer that he had ruined any chance for that evidence to be used because he had spoiled it. He was working against Trump, exactly like Jeff Sessions, exactly like we told you, what do I call him? Deputy Dog, Bill Barr. We knew that these people were corrupt. We told you from the beginning they were corrupt, but what did they do? They played on, as if they were on Trump's side.
Right.
Kari Lake is playing like she's on Trump's side. So now you got Powell, what was that other lawyer's name, who was out front? Sidney Powell. And, they're going to fry her. They're going to fry Giuliani. But wait, what if they were working for the opposite side? They won't fry them. So when we see what happens from this indictment, we'll know whose side they were really on from the beginning.
Yeah, we have yet to see a single one of these lawsuits bring up the Optech scanning software that's in all the machines. Nobody has brought that up, even though it's been out there and discussed for about 6 years.
But come on, Rudy Giuliani is a Crown agent. He's been knighted by the Queen. He works for the Queen. He doesn't work for Donald Trump. Just spit it out, Douglas.
Good point.
Now, can we get to Halpern? Is he a Crown agent?
Let me bring up Halpern. In the JFK assassination records that were released last month, there was a huge section of the data on became a Soviet spy by the name of Dr. Maurice Hyman Halpern. You don't know whether he's related to Jeffrey Halpern or not, but we started investigating his background. And one of the very useful things that was released was CIA phone surveillance 24/7 on the family. And in the family, we started getting indications of who their relatives were and when they were traveling, who traveled to the US, who stayed in Mexico, who went to Europe. And we ended up discovering that this Maurice Halpern was a communist. He was also a former employee of the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. He worked actually in the office with William Donovan, the founder of the OSS. He also then worked at the State Department before he was outed as a communist, and he fled to Mexico to avoid having to give testimony to Congress. And he continued his activities as a communist. He was a member of the Communist Party. Those records are there. They're easy to see. And then we read surveillance of all the people that he continued to interact with. He was eventually extradited from Mexico. He ended up living in the Soviet Union as an NKVD, the precursor to the KGB, as an agent, and continued to be publicized. And in the article that was prepared, we actually have some pictures of him when he lived in the Soviet Union. Now, keep in mind, we're talking about the Soviet Union. We're not talking about Russia today. And this is one of the things that the current propagandists are trying to do, and that is equate one-to-one. Anything that came out of the Soviet Union is currently continuing to operate in Russia. And so he was in the Soviet Union, and he had a son by the name of David Carlos Halprin. And this David Carlos Halprin ended up going to medical school at a special medical school in the University of Chicago, which is a notorious communist outfit. And he received his medical degree as a pediatric surgeon. And then we see that he then continued to practice and eventually was caught as a pedophile. He was convicted as a pedophile, and his son, one of his sons, outed him as a homosexual as well. So we have this not too moral character in the son, who was the son of a Soviet spy and also worked for the OSS and the State Department. And so that was very interesting evidence. And then so we said, okay, is there any connection with Kari Halprin, Kari Lake? And we found some very interesting aspects. We wanted to know if there was any connection to any of these senior Halprins to Colombia and to being Jewish. Well, yes, definitely they were Jewish. And so that was a piece of information we did not know, because neither Kari nor Jeff have ever disclosed who his parents are. And then secondly, the more interesting one was the Colombian connection, because Kari says that Jeffrey Halprin is Colombian American. And there we see there was a obituary in Tempe, Arizona, in the Arizona Republic newspaper, identifying a Betsabe Rodriguez, and her death said she was born in South America, and that one of her children was Cecilia Halprin. We thought, well, that's kind of strange. And then says she was essentially she was a domestic. But it says she was from South America, not Colombia. But then we discovered some other records of flights from Bogota, Colombia to LaGuardia, LaGuardia to Bogota, Colombia, of this Betsabe Rodriguez. And then we have confirmed that this is the same person, and that she was Colombian, and that she was a maid, a domestic. And in these CIA surveillance records, we see that Maurice Halprin had domestics, and there is some allusion to somebody called Betsy, not Betsabe, in the records. And so we have determined that it is highly likely that that Betsabe Rodriguez is Jeff Halprin's grandmother, and that his father, who then came to medical school in the U.S., continued that tradition of having sex with the maids, because during the trial, it's never identified if he was married or if he had any children. But then we see that on his gravestone it says that he was a father, and now we determined that he probably fathered two children from somebody from Colombia, probably another maid. That's what we think. And so therefore, it if Jeff Halpern is not the offspring of Carlos Halpern, then Kari needs to tell us, because it's sure looking like it right now. And the fact that they've withheld very strongly any information about Jeff Halpern's parents, other than that they were Colombian, that is out there in the public record, and they were Jewish. It's all arrows are pointing to this Halpern clan that went to Mexico and were communists, and were members of the OSS and the NKVD, and whose child was a convicted pedophile and homosexual, which is classical behavior for these corruptocrats from the Pilgrim Society, who have no respect for the institutions of marriage, monogamy. I mean, look at what's his name, J. Paul Getty. He had like 6 wives, and how many concubines we don't know, and how many children he bore out of wedlock we don't know. And the same for Boris Johnson. They're all the same. And so this Jewish issue was intriguing. So we looked at the Halpern family genealogy records from various DNA studies worldwide, and we discover that they claim themselves to be Ashkenazi Jews, and from the area around Frankfurt where the Rothschilds came from. And from our other research now, we have concluded that these Ashkenazis are not Hebrew. They're Turkish, they're Persian, they're Sogdian, and even Chinese. And that what we're really seeing here is these money changers are Babylonian Radnites, and that the Halperns are one of the families that they have used for hundreds of years to push forward their Babylonian Radnite merchant banking agenda. And whether Jeff Halpern is the actual relative, he needs to answer for this family that he claims to be from.
Well, one way or the other, she needs to be clear. And since there's so much disinformation and obfuscation, it's obvious that something's being hidden. We need to know what. And this seems to be the most likely path. Now, what people don't understand is that Kamala Harris is not our vice president. Doug Himhoff is, and he's a British agent. Candace Owens is not who she appears to be. She's a British agent. Her stepfather is Michael Farmer. And you see this again and again. Dianne Feinstein, who controls ISIS management, Avid.
Can I make a point? Might you say Michael Farmer, Baron Michael Farmer?
Thank you, Baron Michael Farmer. And so Dianne Feinstein's husband actually owns the propaganda machine called Avid, or ISIS management, which of course ISIS is a reference to the Thames River. When you say ISIS management, you're saying City of London.
Right.
Well, wait a second.
And Oxford.
Then, as we know,
they go punting on the Thames, which is
absolutely
punting on the ISIS River.
That's right. So then you take another idiot politician. Let's take Gavin Newsom. Well, who was his handler? Guilfoyle. And then Guilfoyle went over to become a handler of someone who they assumed might be in line for the president, a son of Donald Trump. So when you're looking at the handlers, in this case, Kari Lake's handler is her husband. Obviously, he's making her famous because he follows her around and makes videos of her and then sends them out so that she can always be in the news. You're not going to get in the news unless Dianne Feinstein's British agent husband allows you to get in the news. And so if you're in the news all the time, you're one of them. It's as simple as that. And you don't get in the news otherwise.
When you look at the number of pictures that always emerges in a Google search with these groomed individuals, it goes on for page after page. You're exactly right. So that's the best way. I mean, she's a TV personality. and you got to keep her in the news. So if you're not going to be buying the images from the newspaper or TV station that she's working for, you've got to create them yourself. And that's cheaper also because you're not having to pay royalties. And so, yeah, there are, I mean, and they're good pictures. They're good. She's a good looking woman. And he's always got her in the right position. And that was another telltale sign of that huge Time magazine article, in that they had very flattering pictures of her. There were no scowling pictures, and they all made her look good. She was looking good.
That's all that matters, is that you look good, and that that every once in a while you can make a soundbite that makes sense. That's why Kamala Harris can't ever. Now they have to say, they should go back and look at every single case she was involved in as a lawyer in California, because they're all going to be slanted. The decisions won't have been written by her. The work won't be done by her. They'll be done by administrative assistants, and that's exactly what we see with so many of these people, and Trump in particular. Okay, what did Trump do? Anyone who sounded forth the same voice of nationalism, in other words, Jeff Sessions says, we need to build a wall on the border, right? Well, he only started saying that when Trump came out and said it, and then he said it, and then Trump hired him. And what does Trump say his number one problem was in his first administration? He chose the wrong people. And why did he choose them? Because Bill Barr came out and made statements that were MAGA statements, and so that's why he got chosen.
The cynic in me now says, well, of course he's going to say that. He knows that's what his supporters believe. And so if he doesn't say what his supporters believe, they'll turn on him. And that's where I agree with you on his position on the vaccines and his adamant response that it was all good. Is he's hoping people will forget that. And so they got to keep pushing these narratives out on each side. Remember, a narrative is a lie. So we have so accepted the idea that a narrative is okay. That's appalling in itself. Truth and lies are now not the commodity that's being pushed in our news media. It's you lie, I lie, we find a third lie, and if the public believes it, we have succeeded.
And as you said, they use the dialectic approach. So when Hunter Biden was caught, what happened with his dirty deals in Ukraine, in Russia, and China, and everywhere else? It all came forth. We got his laptops. We didn't get one laptop. We got 4 laptops. And on those 4 laptops were all the evidence you'd ever need to convict someone. But because they were thrown out as a caricature, as they were thrown out as a cartoon to be the far thesis, and then there'll be the antithesis, which is, oh, that's been debunked. And you come to the middle, I don't care.
By the way, that's a very British approach to propaganda. And that when I lived over there, the tabloids on a daily basis would show scantily clad women, and not just scantily clad, sometimes nude from the waist up. And they had a joke. They called it the nipple count. And they learned long ago that they didn't have to tell the truth. All they had to do was show titillation, tantalizing pictures of women, and that would drive all the men crazy. And then you could tell the men anything you wanted, and they'd believe it. And here, that's what we've got going on here. We've got the titillating factor is front and center. So that's why they're putting forward all these women. I think is because men like to see women over men, and so they're going to bring in some woman as a token.
Well, bring them on, because this woman, she isn't having that stuff. And Kari Lake, she smelled like a fish from the beginning. And the more you talk, the more stinky she and her husband get. What, she doesn't know this about her husband? What kind of wife is that? What kind of politician is that?
She's got an ethics problem because she's supposed to disclose that kind of material information, and she's not doing it.
What if she doesn't know? What if she's so stupid she doesn't know or doesn't care to look?
She knows. She said, "Who's your Colombian daddy?" I mean, she's going to ask basic questions like that. You say he's Colombian. Who is he? You say he's Jewish. Who is he?
Well, the reason I jumped in now, because I can already anticipate the questions coming from the audience, is, well, who do we have out there that could be presidential, vice presidential caliber, the kind of people that we're looking for here in America, not these stooges that they keep putting up. And I'm telling you, I know everybody's all into the MAGA Trump cult, but I haven't seen anything from Trump that tells me he's a good guy.
Well, we don't have to have the answer to that question. We just need to know what the question is. And I think if we don't see any, I mean, one of the questions is, well, if they're not going to put up a candidate that we can support, who are we going to support? Well, we're not going to support any of the candidates these people are putting up because they're all liars. They're all propagandists. They're all Pilgrim Society officials who are taking their orders from the Daily Mail and the City of London.
Absolutely. And anyway, this is what we have predicted. First off, we were the first ones to show the election corruption was because the electronic machines had the same programming. So therefore, there's no election, there's selections. Now,
Right.
back off of that, and then you start to see, oh, then it is a Hollywood production. It is a Disney World production. It is a ridiculous, I don't even know, subliminally programmed commercial trying to sell you something that you don't want. So, we have, and particularly you and your miners, have busted all these people who come forth early. Remember that person that Obama had chosen who was the African-American mayor of Massachusetts? And he basically told the world, this is your next... Deval Patrick. This is your next president, he said. He didn't even give you a choice. He said, this is who you're going to elect because I have chosen him. Oh, well, Michael McKibben and the miners blew that guy out of the water so bad. We haven't heard a word from him since he ran for election in Florida. And he was defeated, and now he doesn't exist anymore. He was one of those groomed people who was just a big fat liar. The better liar you are, the better you're going to be a politician. DeSantis is not a good liar. He's trying to mimic Trump. So let's go back and say what I believe, what I've been saying for some time. They're not going to allow us to vet anyone that they point at that could be a candidate until right before the election, because they know that our research will out them, show that they're criminals like Candace Owens, show that they're criminals like Youngkin, like the man you just mentioned, like Barr, all the people that are being put forward, like we just did a complete expose on Gruesome Newsom. Remember, he had a recall. There was a recall. There was such lack of faith that they recalled him, voted to kick him out of office. Of course, it wasn't a vote. It was a selection process again.
Yeah, and that was an interesting thing, because I talked to a lot of people from California during the recall, and I said, well, you're going to use the same electronic machines? This is insanity. You're doing the same thing and expecting a different result. It ain't going to happen. And there's a level of hope that people have. Also, it's laziness. Let's face it. It's hard to change something, especially in a country or with a lot of people. And so if the processes are out there to count the votes electronically, okay, let's hope the person running the machines isn't going to cheat us this time like they did last time. Now, how stupid is that?
America has been overthrown. Trump was part of it. America is no longer sovereign. The United Nations controls America. And now, when the new vote is taken from the International Committee for the World Health Organization, sovereignty is given away. And then Tedros runs the world. The head of the World Health Organization runs the world, as he ran the world during the pandemic.
You mean now, a communist?
Yeah, and he's a communist. He loves China. He loves President Xi. I mean, how is this even possible? And people, the last thing people would ever say is, oh, the United Nations is a British control agency for hegemony. No way is anybody going to say that except us, and we've proven that it's true because people are so dead asleep.
Oh, by the way, Morton Halperin, another Halperin, we put out there some other Halperins that are notable, that are alive or recently alive. And Morton Halperin comes up big time because he was actually helping as was Maurice Halpern, helping Dean Acheson, the Secretary of State at the time of the Marshall Plan, in the development of the Institute of Pacific Relations that met in San Francisco, where Maurice Halpern attended, and that became the resolutions that became the United Nations, run by the British.
Again, run by the British.
Right.
Now, I want to point out, this is the way it works. Matter of fact, we're going to get you elected. If Trump gets elected, you're going to be the vice president. Why? Because you're going to start
Yeah.
right now spouting MAGA, I wouldn't say doctrine, but MAGA ideas, which Trump doesn't actually believe, but he knows that the people who are conservative Republicans do believe it, and the people who don't believe in vaccinations believe it. Okay, so what did Kari get noted for? On the air, she said she didn't think masks helped anybody during the pandemic. Anyone who did any research would be able to point out to you there is not one single research paper ever done on masks that say they have any efficacy for anyone, not even
Right.
doctors in an operation room.
Including the 2008 study that Fauci wrote, saying that masks from the Spanish flu area actually caused the bacteria to grow.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Fauci determined that more than 51% of the people who died in the Spanish flu, it was because they wore masks, and they
Right.
actually had bacterial pneumonia because the masks cause bacterial pneumonia, which is, of course, the number one death symptom of COVID-19. So that's how she started off. So she started off small, and she started making noise. So they moved her up. Excuse me. Nobody who is going against the mainstream media is going to be promoted in the mainstream media. She was,
Right.
repeatedly. And she went right up the ladder, and then she kept saying more and more MAGA-like, Trump-like things. This is a setup. And remember, she used to be a major raving lunatic Democrat.
Right.
Because why? All mainstream media is left tending, Democrat tending, liberal tending, basically British socialism,
Okay,
or
so
what
I
I
need
call
to
chaos
stop you here,
Marxism.
and talk about another element of Jeff Halpern, which is really critical here. His bio doesn't begin until he graduates from college. I can't remember what college it was. But anyway, his first job was as a news editor and photographer for NBC News New York, which is headquartered at 30 Rockefeller Center in the heart of New York. Now, for somebody coming fresh out of media school, that is not a place you place anybody that just graduates and wants a job. This is a grooming building. If the walls could talk in 30 Rockefeller Center, I'm sure, Douglas, you're going to see demons oozing from every crevice and cranny, because this is the location that the British picked to house Sir William Stevenson, who was known as Intrepid, who ran the British propaganda effort during World War II. It is also the place that Henry Kissinger and Paul Volcker went to work for the Rockefeller Foundation right after World War II in like 1950. About the same time Maurice Halpern is headed to Mexico, by the way. It is also the location of NBC. It is also the location of the office of the founder of RCA, David Sarnoff, who then founded NBC. So we're talking if you want to talk about a demon lair, 30 Rockefeller Center is a demon lair, and is the current studios for NBC New York. So here we have Jeff Halpern going there and working for 4 years as a news editor. This is not a job you give to a guy fresh out of school. So whose news was he editing? And it's pretty clear he was being groomed to be then placed at whatever news area they needed him in to recruit these on-screen talent in order to control them. And probably Kari was selected.
You always notice that the children of CIA agents get placed into news, propaganda, politics. They get given these positions, they get groomed, and it's all blood lineage. It's the same British habit that they have. These are, in fact, lineages of evil. Now, we're going to have to end here, but I just want to say one more thing. Kari Lake's not a lake to me. She's more like a pond. And as Tyler says, she's more like a swamp. She's just a swamp
There we
creature.
go. That's a swamp.
It's
And
more like a mud puddle. Just step in it and move on.
yeah, so she's going to be another one that you're going to knock out of the race with your
Mhm.
research here, because all you have to do is ask the question, can you trust someone who was a Democrat, a raving Democrat, who then becomes an independent and then becomes a conservative Republican because she starts to spout Trump stuff? No. If you trust someone like that, then I think we should trust the plan and know that Sessions is going to save the day, as Q told us. No, those are lies. Those are the far right propaganda, which is the same grotesque lies that the far left uses. So thank you for your research.
You're welcome. I envision on each one of their desks, there's a big poster that has the top 50 phrases that you use to fool Republicans or to fool conservatives. And as long as you get those out there every day, you're going to fool most people most of the time.
But it's not working anymore. Look at DeSantis's fall. Look at nobody wants to touch Glenn Youngkin. Kamala Harris is, we all know who she is. They can't put her in there because she is an illegal alien. So all of these things are getting to be known. The truth is getting to be known. I say that Trump himself knows these things, but can't do anything about it. He surrounded himself with globalists the first time. What's to say he won't do it the second time? And I think that the best vice president he could pick would be you, Michael, because at least he would have a researcher on his team to say, oh, this person walked in? No. He's associated with this and this and this. Trump needs somebody with some discernment and the ability to research if he's going to be an effective president.
That's the least favorite job I could ever have.
They'll sign the Miller Act notice.
You're funny.
But yes, you're right, Tyler. All you have to do is spout the standard talking points, and that's it. And your history, no one remembers yesterday. No one remembers that Gavin Newsom was recalled and should have been kicked out of office. Now, at the last minute, they want to put him up to take Biden's place because Biden's an idiot. And of course, to mention, he's not Biden to begin with, and he's a criminal.
And you got his former wife trailing Jr. I mean,
let me check my poster. Oh, I'm going after the deep state. That's what he said last night. I'm going after them.
And the stable genius doesn't know that the deep state has a name. It's called the Senior Executive Service and Crown Agents. Grow a pair, Trump, and call it out.
And if Kari Lake was a true investigative journalist and did any research at all, period, from even what she knew just doing her job, then she would have told us more truth. Same thing with Trump.
Well, I still would like her. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. I want her to come forward now and tell us who Jeff Lake's parents are and give us either confirm the research or say that research is misdirected. You still got the Halpern problem. But besides that, who was Jeff's dad and who was Jeff's mother?